Tesla stock is prone to swings, but all stocks are prone to swings. Why is that? Well, you can ask all the Wall Street guys, and they will give you an answer that always ends with, buy something from me. And so we're going to go with somebody who gives the information away for free. I got Randy Kirk with me. I'm Brian. Welcome to my Tesla Weekend. So, Randy, with that intro, that means you can't hawk your books and bottle openers today. I am so sorry, but that's okay. I'll do it in the description for you. The stock market moves a lot. It moves in both directions, sometimes rationally, sometimes irrationally. Sometimes there's big news that comes out that is beyond the scope that impacts the entire market. Let's talk about some of the things that move a stock on a daily basis. And let's start with big macro things.
Yeah, so one of my philosophies, and in fact, the philosophy that drives my channel, is that you can't say, oh, it's the fundamentals of the company. You can't say it's the technicals. You can't say which way the economy is going. And you can't say it's the macro. All four of those matter. And people get confused. I mean, I watch some folks on X who are predicting the market every day, and they're playing the market every day as day traders, which I did for a year. And by the way, I don't know, Brian, if you've ever heard this before. I made 33 times my money in 1 year. And I don't know that anybody that I've ever known or heard from, maybe somebody in the comments below can say they did better than 33 times their money in 1 year. But it was so hard on the heart. I had to give it up. It was just, talk about stress. Anyway, but when you're playing the market on a daily basis like that successfully, you start to see what works and what doesn't work. Well, I could become a technicalist, and start figuring out the 50-day moving average and the 200-day moving average and the iron crosses and the red crosses and the blue crosses and all these gold crosses. Or I could, just say, okay, I'm going to look at the NASDAQ. What's the NASDAQ doing? What's the general market doing? And that's but I found out as I was doing that day trade, well, actually, it's been 50 years of following the market that taught me this. You got to start with the fundamentals, because at the end of all time, it's always going to be a weighing machine. It's always going to be that the stock market is going to look at those fundamentals and say, how much can I make if I own a piece of this company? And then all branding stuff that we talked about the other day, it all goes away eventually, because how much money are they putting in the kitty? That's really what's going to matter.
I've heard short term, it's a sentiment machine. How's that go? Short term moves measures sentiment, and long term it's a weighing. What is it? Something like that.
I don't remember the quote either, but it's like that. Yes.
But on short term macro stuff, you've got, the Fed announces interest rates went up or down. Right. You've got unemployment numbers came out better or worse than expected. You've got consumer price index. You've got all these things, and you might see a day where the entire market is red the fundamentals of all these companies didn't change from yesterday. Well, it did because 0.1% more people are looking for work or not looking for work. Those trying to predict those swings is very, very difficult. And
especially when you have something like a pandemic come along.
I'm sure there are people who beat your 33X by a little system I like to call luck. And I'm sure there are people who decimated their holdings by a factor of 33 using something called bad luck. I always tell people, don't try and time your trades. The people who are doing the big trades already have better information. They have access to information we don't. And they have algorithms that move at lightning fast speed in ways that you and I cannot. And you and I are still beholden to whichever trading platform allows us to buy the trades. I have never yet, when I've executed a trade, I've never actually gotten it for that price. And I've never gotten it for a better price than I expected, only a worse price. And I don't believe that's magic or bad luck. I think that's part of the system. I think they skim a couple pennies every time because they can. And what a profit center that is for them.
So, Brian, let me modify your idea of just a second
Yes.
ago, where you talk about the big guys having more information. So, if you want to become a day trader or even trade a little more aggressively, let's just say you want to be an aggressive trader. Well, then that is actually where you can get an advantage. You can have more information than the big guys. How do you get more information than the big guys? You turn it into a business. You turn it into a career. I mean, I literally spent that year that I was doing the day trading, I was spending 40 hours a week studying about Tesla, studying about the market, studying about the trends in the economy. And now that's what I do on my channel is all that information, I still spend the same 40 hours, but now I'm giving that information away for free on my channel. So that other people can have an edge over the big guys. Because guess what? Those big guys are, as you know, they're completely wrong all the time. All these pundits on CNBC come out and say stuff that we know as soon as it comes out of their mouth is complete hogwash. Well, if the CNBC guy says some hogwash and you're sitting there and you go, I know that's not true. You now have that arbitrage potential to come in and buy based on the drop in the stock because of the FUD. And now you're in a better position than even the biggest guys on the street.
I had a gentleman on X the other day, a contributor to New York Times and Wall Street Journal, decide that I was worthy of being targeted by him for responding to, he made some very foolish assumptions about the Cybertruck range. He said, really, we're talking a truck with 125 miles of range because in cold weather, you lose 20%. And I was like, okay, so first of all, you don't. Right. And he goes, you don't even own an EV. So at least he knows who I am. He just doesn't keep up to date on the news. So I posted a picture of me with my taking delivery and just wrote, sit down. But 20% range loss in the winter, we know that's not true because we know people who've driven to the Arctic Circle. Friend of both our shows, Lars, has done that. A road trip to the Arctic Circle in the dead of winter. A very exciting series. Then he said, also, when the tonneau's open, you lose 15%. Well, why would you leave the tonneau open then? What do you... And when you're towing, you lose half. And it's like, well, right. We don't know if it's going to be half. That is a reasonable assumption based on physics. And he said, and if you do all three, I'm like, why would you leave the tonneau open when you're towing? You can't see past the trailer anyway, and you don't have a rear view mirror. Why would you do... I mean,
But this guy, how come he didn't include having his dog stick his head out the window?
They don't even factor that in, Randy.
I know.
It's so... I mean, Tesla should also quote range with your dog's head hanging out the window. Come on. But yeah, he said, well, he goes, how many shares do you hold? Because I'll tell you, I hold no shares, and that makes me more honest than you. I said, I hold over 1,000 shares for which I paid less than $15,000. And I bought them because I saw something in the company you didn't. Right. And I'm holding it and not selling it because I still see something that you don't. If you saw what I see, you'd be buying now. And I've had, well, why didn't you sell when it was at 400? I bet you're kicking yourself. If I was the person who was going to sell at 400, I would have sold at 100. And then at 200, and then I would have sold when I got my first 20% gain. Look at me, I beat the market and lost what? I lost the other 19x. And he said, why are you attacking me? What do you think? I've got some hidden agenda? I said, no, I don't think you're devious. I think you're starting with a flawed premise, and it's giving you incorrect results. He actually accepted that. He's like, oh. Okay, well, that's fair. But you can't just stack all these things to get to that 1% use case where, gasoline cars get shorter range in high temperatures and low temperatures. They're optimized for certain temperatures. And the fuel injectors can moderate based on temperature, but only within the bounds of physics. At 20 below, your truck is going to get terrible gas mileage because physics is the law. Yeah, everything else is a regulation. I don't know, suggestion.
So Brian, one thing that people can do if they want to get my analysis after all these years with regard to Tesla, at least now, at least currently, and for the last couple of years, is that Tesla moves with the NASDAQ. Now, it was moving a little bit more exactly with what I call the Cathie Wood stocks. All these very, very risky growth stocks that Cathie likes. It was moving with the Cathie Wood stocks really precisely, but now it's moving I think people are now seeing it as stronger than the Cathie stocks, which it clearly is. But it's more like the NASDAQ, but it has a delta on it. It moves about twice as fast as the NASDAQ on the way up, and it moves about twice as much as the NASDAQ on the way down. And if you start looking at that analysis, you do that analysis over the last 2 or 3 years, you're going to see that what Elon said about submarines or about the price of the stock or about anything else, it all goes away within a couple of weeks. It's right back to following the NASDAQ along that same course. Now, sometimes it gets way out beyond the NASDAQ, like it did when it hit the all-time high. If you do an analysis on the all-time high, Brian, the stock could be at 820 right now instead of 410 because the company's twice as big and the company's making twice as much money as it was making in the November of 2021. So we should be at 820 right now. But the stock market at that time was way out over its skis in terms of its risk on position at that time. And so that's why it was so crazy out there. Well, I'm now predicting that Tesla will be back at 410 at the end of January because I believe the market is going to be more risk on at the end of January, in addition to Tesla hitting their fundamental numbers.
I've talked with investors who are still on board, but upset because they bought over 300, over 400, at the highs. They made the mistake that a lot of people make when they sold at 100, which is they're following the herd. They're following the hype. If you get your stock advice from memes, you're not doing your due diligence. You're going to get bad advice based on just bad information. I mean, there's 100 ways to say it. But so in terms of things that can move the stock price on a daily basis, let's just list a bunch. You could have a big fund that rebalances. Maybe ARK Invest dropped 20,000 shares. You could have a big fund that buys in. You could have quarterly numbers. You could have a bad headline. I wouldn't be surprised if driver in China mashed the wrong pedal and had a horrible, horrible accident. That is something that can move the stock.
Last week, there was a weird one, Brian. I was sitting there going, why did the entire market drop like this, like in a quick second? And there was like no headline. I was looking around and I finally figured out the next day, Moody's had dropped their rating on the China economy. They dropped their rating like they did on the US economy a while back. They dropped their rating on the China economy. And exactly at that point is when the thing dropped. So if you're not watching the news all day long like I am, you're going to miss that and you're going to miss that opportunity. But there's other people out there. They've got all kinds of folks that are looking for anything that might throw things for a loop. That's where the big guys have us beat, is most people can't watch. They got to do their job. They got to take care of their families. They got to go on vacation. And those big guys have people doing it for them. And so they can pick that news deal and beat us on the news deal. But when it comes to the fundamentals of the company, we can beat them if we really, really stay glued to what's going on with the company. And that's what I try to do. And it's part of what you do on the channel too, even though you're not as inclined to be all about the stock. On my channel, we are all about the stock. We're all about the economy. We're all about those nuances that are affecting the stock every single day.
And it could be things as little as, when it was a Super Bowl maybe 2-3 years ago, every athlete they interviewed, they said, by the way, what's your dream car? And I swear there might have been one that didn't say, I'm going to get a Tesla. It's exciting. But all these little things can have a very short-term effect that doesn't last, because at the end of the day, and by the end of the day, I mean the end of the year or century, it all comes down to fundamentals. Is the company growing or not? And I like to say Tesla is not the next Apple. It is not the next Google. It is not the next Ford. It is the next Dutch East India Company. You say, well, why is Tesla worth so much more than Ford? Because Ford doesn't build power plants, because Ford doesn't build robots that can revolutionize the world, because Ford's idea of autonomy is mediocre lane keep assist on highways. Yeah, you can take your hands off and that's cool, but you better be paying attention, because a bend in the road, and I do mean just a bend, it is likely to disengage. I have driven it myself and seen it happen. So yeah, don't get too emotional about short-term moves. If you liked it at 300 enough to buy it, you should love it at 240.
Here's another one, Brian. And this is what I did when I was day trading. It was one of my rules. Every day, if I was going to make a trade, if I was inclined at all to make a trade, I would erase everything that I had ever done with regard to trading that stock. and say, would I buy the stock today at this price?
Hmm. Oh, I
Okay.
love
Would
that.
I sell the stock today at this price? What would I do today at this price if I had no history? And that way, if you're sitting at 300 and you're like, well, yeah, I should sell because I think the stock is going to stay at 250 forever, then you should. But if you're sitting with the stock and you own it at 350 and you think the stock's going to 1,000, then you should hold that. Now, none of this is investment advice.
But it's life advice.
It's
It's
life.
life advice. The same is true when it comes to your family. Would I sell my children at this price or would I buy them? And I think my children are a bargain. So get in while you can. I do
Do they
have.
watch? They must watch your show because
They,
you quickly figured out how to end that little.
they don't. They don't. Which is why they've got a lot of potential still to go. So we'll figure that out. So guys, yeah, in the comments, what do you think the stock's going to be worth when you sell it? And when are you planning to sell it? Leave it in them comments. We got to know. So if everybody else, like, subscribe, do the usual things. Check out the good old Randy Kirk channel. He does a video or two from time to time. And by that, I mean constantly. And everybody else, stay tuned, stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots on the flippity flop.